A reporter who sat in that Los Angeles courtroom for all 5 days of the hearing was asked a simple question when it was over. Of everything the prosecution put on, the blood, the DNA, the chainsaws, the maps, what actually proved that David Burke killed Celeste Rivas Hernandez? Not that he hid her body, not that he cut it apart, that he killed her. Her answer was one word: none. Now hold that against everything else you've heard about this case, because almost all of it points the other way. A 14-year-old girl's dismembered remains found in the front trunk of a Tesla registered to a rising pop star. Air fresheners stuffed into that trunk to hide the smell. Chainsaws in a body bag and a shovel ordered under fake names. 2 of her fingers cut away, the 2 that carried tattoos linking her to him. A trail of location data placing his car and his phone on a lonely road in the hills above Santa Barbara. 3 separate times near where her passport turned up in the brush. How can both of those be true at once? How can the evidence look this overwhelming and at the same time leave the central question, the killing itself, unproven? That contradiction is the real story of this hearing. And once you understand it, you understand why a case that seems airtight in the headlines is underneath a genuine fight, one that a badly decomposed body, a missing murder weapon, and a defense team playing a long game have all conspired to keep open. So let's walk through what 5 days of testimony actually established and where exactly it stopped.
Let's start from the beginning. So, you're a New Yorker.
New Yorker. Queens, New York.
What are your parents like? Are they musicians?
Not at all. My dad is a litigator for a law firm. My mother was a teacher. She doesn't do it anymore, but she does notary now.
One frame to carry with you first because it changes the meaning of the ending. This was a preliminary hearing, not a trial. Its only job was to decide whether there's enough evidence to justify a trial at all, a standard called probable cause, which is a low bar. Nothing like the beyond a reasonable doubt a jury demands. So when I tell you the judge ruled the case moves forward, and she did on every count, that does not mean the gaps got filled. It means they get argued in front of a jury instead of a judge. Keep that in your hand the whole way through. Start with what's solid because there's a great deal of it and it's genuinely hard to argue with. Over the 5 days, a parade of LAPD criminalists built a forensic chain running from Celeste's remains straight back to Burke's rented home in the Hollywood Hills. The most powerful single link was an inflatable pool. A criminalist named Lisa Lahendro testified that she took blue plastic fragments the county medical examiner's office had recovered from the girl's remains. Fragments embedded in the grimmest detail in her knee, and physically matched them to portions missing from a blue inflatable pool found in Burke's garage. 3 of the pieces fit like puzzle pieces. 9 more looked consistent but couldn't be seated exactly. Sit for a second with why that particular evidence hit so hard, because it's different in kind from most of what gets called forensic proof. It isn't a statistic. It isn't a lab's interpretation you have to trust. It's a fragment from a child's body slotting into an object from the defendant's garage, the way 2 halves of a torn photo line up. A jury doesn't need a degree to grasp it. They can see it. Prosecutors say the pool was used to catch blood during the dismemberment, and that fragment match is the backbone of the claim. A second criminalist, Lauren Wallace, unrolled that same pool and found it smelled almost laundry fresh, with dryer sheets stuck to it. Someone had tried to clean it. She saw no blood with the naked eye. But when she sprayed it with Blue Star, a chemical that glows where blood has been, a patch of the pool lit up. That glow doesn't tell you whose blood, or even prove conclusively that it's blood. It signals likely traces. Set beside the fragment match, though, it points the same way. Then comes the DNA, and here the numbers get staggering. Criminalist Samantha Tosh testified that apparent bloodstains on a rowing machine, a green tarp, a Tesla charger plug, a rubber garage mat, and the front trunk of the Tesla were all consistent with Celeste's DNA profile, a profile investigators built from a toenail taken during the autopsy. On some of those items, she put the odds at 1 septillion, a 1 trailed by 24 zeros, times more likely to be Celeste's DNA than a stranger's. All told, she said, investigators tied the girl's DNA to 15 separate locations. Even here, the defense has a real foothold. And it's worth previewing because it comes back. Celeste's DNA being in that house isn't shocking on its own. She had, by the prosecution's own telling, spent significant time there. The contested question isn't whether her DNA is present, it's whether it got there as blood from a dismemberment or as ordinary traces from a person who'd lived in the space. On some items, that's a hard line to draw. On the trunk of the Tesla where her remains were found, it's a much harder one for the defense to walk back. And then the tools and the length someone went to acquire them without leaving a name. LAPD homicide detective Joshua Byers testified that Burke had items shipped to his home under 2 different aliases. As Travian Davis, he allegedly ordered from Amazon a fireproof mat, a shovel, an inflatable pool, and several chainsaws. As Victoria Martinez, he ordered what Byers called a burn box, a device. In the detective's words, capable of reaching a temperature high enough to burn items, something he compared to a mini crematorium. That testimony lands like a hammer the first time you hear it, but look closely at what it is and isn't. Using fake names to buy tools of dismemberment is powerful evidence of planning and guilt around the disposal of a body. It is not by itself evidence of the killing, and there's a timeline buried inside it that the defense pounced on. Will get there. Here's the detail from the purchases that quietly complicates the tidiest version of the story. Most of the incriminating items were never recovered. 2 chainsaws turned up at the home and both tested negative for blood. A third, ordered from Home Depot, was never found. The shovel was never found. The fireproof mat was never found. So the actual instruments the prosecution says carved up a 14-year-old are to a striking degree simply missing from the evidence locker. The defense leaned on the 2 chainsaws that were found. Attorney Blair Burke asked why they weren't collected and tested for marks on the blade consistent with dismemberment. Byers' answer was one of the prosecution's better moments. If those chainsaws had been used to cut apart a body, he said, there's no way they wouldn't have blood on them. Meaning they tested clean because they weren't the tools. Reasonable. But notice where it leaves things. The real tools are the ones that vanished. Now the hardest testimony in the hearing, and I'll handle it carefully because it goes to the heart of the prosecution's premeditation theory. Byers testified that Celeste and Burke shared matching tattoos. She had a SHHH tattoo and his name inked on a finger. When Burke was arrested, booking photos showed he had Celeste tattooed on his own left ring finger and a matching SHHH on his right hand. And when Celeste's remains were examined, 2 fingers were gone from one hand, a pinky and a ring finger. In a filing, prosecutors argued those specific fingers were removed because they carried the identifying tattoos. If that's right, it's evidence of a cold and deliberate mind at work after the death, someone thinking about identification, about erasing the threads back to himself. But be precise, because this is exactly the kind of detail that hardens into fact in the retelling when it's really an inference. The medical examiner could not date the dismemberment. The reason for the missing fingers is the prosecution's reading, a strong and chilling one, but a reading. It speaks to the cover-up. It does not on its own establish who killed her or how, which brings us to the medical examiner and to the most important set of limits in the entire case. The deputy medical examiner testified that Celeste died of 2 penetrating wounds, punctures to the chest and abdomen, and ruled the death a homicide. That's the foundation of the murder charge, and it's real. But her body had been in that trunk for close to 5 months. Testimony described the remains as so decomposed that parts had liquefied, and that decomposition forced concession after concession under cross-examination, concessions the defense will carry straight into trial. He could not fix the date of death. He would say she'd been dead weeks. He would not say months, which means the autopsy cannot independently confirm the prosecution's date of April 23. He could not say which wound came first, or how far apart they landed, or how long she survived either one. And when the defense asked whether he could rule out that Celeste herself had held the instrument that made the wounds, He testified that given the state of the remains, he could not. Though he added he'd expect to find hesitation marks in a self-inflicted case and did not describe finding any. Read that carefully because it's the point most likely to be twisted in both directions. The defense floating the idea that Celeste harmed herself is not evidence that she did. Reporters in the room described the suggestion as landing implausibly. At a preliminary hearing, the defense isn't trying to prove an alternative. It's mapping the precise spots where the prosecution's certainty runs dry. And on the core questions, how exactly Celeste died, in what order, by whose hand, the honest answer from the medical evidence alone is that it doesn't reach that far. That's not a gap the defense invented. It's one that 5 months of decomposition created, and no forensic skill can fully close it. If the body couldn't nail down the timeline, the prosecution turned to the thing that could, the data. And this is where the circumstantial case is at its strongest, precisely because two independent sources back each other up. An LAPD analyst testified that Burke's Tesla traveled from the Hollywood Hills west along Sunset and then north into Santa Barbara County, and that the path of Burke's iPhone matched the car's. Same day, same times, same locations. That combined path lined up with where Celeste's passport card was later found, off State Route 154 near Lake Cachuma. And the car and phone made that trip not once but 3 times, first on the night of April 23 when prosecutors say she was last seen alive, then twice more in May. A car and a phone moving in lockstep, returning again and again to a desolate road where a piece of the dead girl's identity surfaced. That is very hard to explain innocently. There was one more digital detail, and how the defense handled it tells you everything about how carefully this case has to be read. Testimony indicated a call was placed from Burke's phone to Celeste's phone, roughly half an hour to an hour after the Tesla hit the road heading north. The prosecution's framing, why call the phone of someone already dead in your house unless you're performing a search, building a record, part of the cover-up. But watch the defense's move. They objected and won to make the court record state that it was Burke's phone that placed the call, not that Burke placed it. That sounds like hair-splitting. It isn't. It's the defense planting a flag on a principle they'll use everywhere at trial. The phone is not the person, the Tesla is not the driver. Every time the prosecution says Burke did X, the defense will answer Burke's device recorded X. In a case with no eyewitness to the killing, that distinction is a genuine line of defense, and they started laying it down on day 3. So put it together, because now the shape is clear and the shape is the whole story. On concealment and dismemberment, the evidence is dense, physical, and hard to dispute. The pool fragments, the DNA across 15 items, the aliases, the burn box, the triple road trip corroborated by 2 data sources. It is a formidable case that a body was cut apart and disposed of by someone who took elaborate, premeditated steps to cover it up. But every piece of that is about what happened after Celeste died. Here is the gap as plainly as I can put it. No one testified to witnessing the killing. No surveillance video caught it. Burke's Hollywood Hills home, for all the attention, produced no footage of Celeste arriving or of anything happening to her. The Uber that allegedly brought her that night, the driver couldn't definitively confirm dropping her at the house. No murder weapon was ever found. And the timeline of the incriminating purchases runs the wrong way for a plant-a-kill. The shovel, the chainsaws, the burn box, the mat were ordered after April 23, not before. In fact, the DA's own summary of the case notes that the day after Celeste arrived and was never seen again, Burke is accused of ordering a shovel. Slow down on that because it's the hinge of everything. He bought a shovel and a burn box the day after she died is devastating proof that he covered up a death. It is far weaker proof that he planned in advance to cause one. And the gap between those two ideas is quite literally the gap between first-degree murder with special circumstances, a potential death penalty case, and something less. The prosecution's strongest evidence of planning clusters on the disposal side of the line, not the killing side. That's why the reporter's one-word answer matters so much. Asked what showed Burke actually murdered Celeste, not tidied up afterward, but killed her, she said there hadn't been any and that the case on that point is circumstantial. That's not a defense talking point. It's a working journalist describing accurately what 5 days of testimony did and did not contain. Now I have to complicate my own point because no direct evidence of the killing is true, and it's also easy to misread in a way that flatters the defense more than the facts do. Circumstantial does not mean weak. It does not mean insufficient. Cases are brought and won on entirely circumstantial evidence constantly. You don't need an eyewitness and you don't need a recovered weapon to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Juries convict on chains of inference all the time, and appellate courts uphold it when the chain is strong enough that no reasonable innocent explanation survives. And the prosecution's path is a legitimate one. It runs like this. Celeste's phone went permanently dark after she reached the house. There's motive testimony that she'd threatened to expose the relationship and torch a music career that had generated somewhere around $11 to $13 million, depending on which witness's figure you take. There's the road trip, the aliases, the burn box, the fingers. Fuse it all and the prosecution will argue only one reading fits. She came to his house, she died there, and he spent the following days on an elaborate disposal. If a jury agrees no innocent story accounts for the whole, they can convict without ever seeing the moment of death. DA Nathan Hochman has said what came out at the hearing was only a small, illustrative fraction of the evidence and that a great deal was held back. Partly the usual prosecutorial posture, but plausible, since at a prelim you only have to clear probable cause and have every reason not to show your hand. So hold both truths at once, which is the entire discipline this case demands. The absence of direct evidence of the killing is real, and it's the defense's central opening. And a strong circumstantial case can absolutely convict in spite of it. Those don't cancel out. Together they define the battlefield. Watch, too, what the defense was doing across those 5 days because none of it was idle. They weren't trying to win the preliminary hearing, that's nearly impossible, and they surely knew the case would be bound over. They were rehearsing for trial and planting seeds. 3 stand out. First, the fake blood. LAPD found jugs of it in Burke's garage. There's a mundane explanation. His music videos feature fake blood-stained shirts, and there was testimony that merch was being made there. The forensic team tested it, it came back negative, it wasn't booked. It explains nothing about the real DNA or the pool, but it establishes a garage where blood-like substances were a normal part of the work, and muddying the intuitive picture is a defense's job. Second, the missing tools and the untested touch DNA. They pressed on what a more thorough analysis might have shown about who else might have been involved. Keep an ear on that phrase, who else. Third, a detail worth flagging: testimony that cleaning wipes in a garage trash bag carried staining consistent with Celeste's DNA but not Burke's, and that a swab from the bag held a mixture of DNA from 4 people. On its own, that proves little. Shared spaces collect DNA. But it's another seed. The scene isn't as cleanly Burke alone as the narrative implies. None of these is a defense by itself. Together they are the raw material for reasonable doubt. A chaotic garage, missing tools, untested evidence, other people's DNA, a body too decomposed to say how or exactly when she died, and not one witness or camera to the killing. And so to where it now stands. Judge Charlene Almedo ruled on the standard before her probable cause and held Burke to answer on all counts, including the special circumstances that make this potentially capital: murder for financial gain, murder by lying in wait, murder of a witness, and the personal use of a sharp instrument. The people have met their burden on all counts, she said. He remains held without bail. He's due back in court on August 10, with a pretrial filing date of August 31 and a trial that could begin within 90 days of that, though given the mountain of evidence, few expect it to move that fast. That ruling doesn't close the gap we've been tracing, it relocates it. It sends the same unanswered question: what evidence shows the killing itself, from a judge weighing probable cause to a jury weighing reasonable doubt. or the missing weapon, the absent eyewitness. The decomposition that blurred the timeline, and every seed the defense planted will all be argued under a far harsher light. And there's a strategic layer over all of it worth understanding, because it may matter more than the trial. Hodgman has said no death penalty decision has been made and that his office is weighing it, and he said on the record that Burke's team is always free to make a plea offer. Read those together with Hodgman's own history, and a picture forms that has little to do with an execution. California hasn't carried one out since 2006 and has been under a moratorium since 2019. And Hodgman himself, since taking office, has not sought a single death verdict, and said when elected he'd reserve capital charges for cases like the cold-blooded assassination of a police officer or a mass shooting. So the death penalty exposure here functions most plausibly as leverage, a lever to pull the defense toward a plea to life without parole, sparing a public trial built on the very worst of this evidence and sparing Celeste's family from sitting through it a second time. Whether Burke takes that road, no one outside his defense team knows. So here's where I'll leave it, and I'll leave it honestly. The evidence that Celeste Rivas Hernandez was dismembered and disposed of in that house by someone who planned the cover-up in meticulous detail is about as strong as circumstantial evidence gets. The evidence of the killing itself, the act, the intent, the weapon, the moment is genuinely thinner, and it rests on a timeline a badly decomposed body could not confirm. A judge found that enough to go forward. A jury will decide whether it's enough to convict. And the honest thing, the thing this case keeps demanding of anyone who covers it, is to hold those two questions apart and to keep saying plainly which is which. We'll follow it through August, through the arraignment, and into trial. And we'll bring you the facts as they're actually verified, not a moment before.